I'm a fool to do your dirty work. Go, yeah. I don't want
Uaisseachta an seo tá ar neart go neart ar fud na tíre, ha dig me de stopúnas. So
You were saying yourself, like you're up the road from, what was it? There was something to do, was it with the Young Irelanders or something else?
Yeah. I want to maybe pull myself back from getting too deep into this tangent because it could derail the conversation. But something that's always interested me is that growing up in Buffalo, New York, there was in, I believe, 1866, an invasion of Canada by around 1,000 Irish Fenians, most of whom were veterans of the U.S. Civil War and actually had just left, service in the Civil War. A lot of the leaders were actually like decorated generals on the Union side, and they successfully invaded Fort Erie and captured the fort and held it for about a day, and they retreated. There are a lot of issues. The guy, John O'Neill, was the commanding general, and there were just tons of logistical issues, defectors, weapons that didn't show up. But the idea that captured my imagination was that they didn't want to take over Canada. They wanted to ransom Canada to Britain in exchange for Ireland's freedom. And just the romantic daring of that idea has always fascinated me. And the fact that it almost worked is pretty interesting.
It is pretty interesting with that kind of stuff. Like you see it as well with 1916, how there was a lot of these engagements where they were very heavily outnumbered.
Is that episode well known in Ireland, or is it sort of part of the Irish history that might be taught in schools?
It is. It's a lot of this stuff is known to varying degrees if it's well known or not, but it's probably overshadowed by a lot of stuff that's a lot closer to home. But it does, these kind of episodes do pop up from time to time. There was another one, I think it was it the American Navy, or it was a Navy ship or a whaling ship that helped perform like a prison break on Tasmania of I think it was 5 or 6 Fenian prisoners. That's another kind of episode that it's like slotted into the same kind of slot of these Irish escapades that happened abroad as well, but all to do with the Fenian movement. But yeah, no, I'd say there's a lot of these kind of very mad, kind of quirky way anecdotes and episodes in Irish history. It's never a straightforward line, you know what I mean? There's always mad tangents and kind of side quests. It's kind of crazy, but it's mental if that could have worked. It's cool to notice that in the Union Army that Irish officers or Irish people in general enjoyed a little bit more social mobility than in the British Army. You know what I mean? Where the majority of Irish in the British Army were actually not really allowed to become officers. I think there was something to do with penal laws as well, but something to do also with general sectarianism or general kind of anti-Catholic sentiment that for some reason might not have been as prevalent there. But I'm not 100% on. I'm more a medievalist. I'm not gonna into the kind of modern times.
Yeah.
But there you go.
That's maybe a good transition. You mentioned you're a medievalist. Maybe we could start there. If I know a little bit about your background. I was really interested to see the sort of spread of interest across Colin Games, Madra Tianga. Also, you're going to have to help me with pronunciation throughout this whole episode. So please feel free to correct me, jump in at any time. But I wondered, could we start there? Could you just give a bit of an overview of your background, the academically and the extracurriculars too?
So my background myself, I was obviously born in Scotland, raised in Ireland, to father from Donegal, mother from the very, very far north of Scotland. We grew up down in Wexford. Been all around on Erasmus. I went this is actually my second time in university. The first time I was in art college. I dropped out then to go live in Greece. Um, but yeah, so what I'm doing at the minute is I'm pursuing a Master of Arts in the University of Glasgow in Celtic Studies, Celtic Civilization, and in Gaelic, which is kind of like the sister language to Irish. Um, I've also in 2023 I founded Coloon Games, which is an Irish language first video games company. To what we do is we make games heavily featuring Irish, about Irish stories, about Irish people, about Irish culture, and stuff in general. And I'm also helping with the promotion and with the art for Maduchanga, which is an Irish language app, 100% human made, kind of very um, hostile kind of opinion of AI. That kind of company has. So it's all human made, all human voices. Just like a big umbrella to bring all these Irish language creators together to help teach people Irish in Ireland and abroad. Uh, but that's the background anyway.
How do you pronounce that again? The open source app for Irish language.
Taijan Ifigo, which is the standard dialect, it's Madra Changa, but I speak Ulster Irish, so we would say Madu Changa. That's how you say dog in Irish, in Ulster Irish. But yeah, Madra Changa is how you pronounce it.
Yeah, and Chenga is
It's tongue,
language
but
or
like in the
tongue?
context, it's language. So like it's like language dog. That's what it means.
Language dog. I love that. Well, it's such a cool idea to see. So much of I don't know. Everybody's on Duolingo, right? But like this is the so ambitious. From what I can see from the outside, I'm really excited to see it come to life. But it also seems like it's you're describing it as like a nexus for people involved in the revival of Irish language. Irish and its sister languages. Is that a generational shift that's going on right
Definitely
now?
see that like from the ground. That's kind of what it seems. Um, when you're in Ireland itself, and even kind of to a lesser extent in Scotland, there is a definite shift with the younger generation where there's almost like an explosion of interest in Irish and not just the language, but like Irish culture and Irish and like older kind of Gaelic art and Gaelic culture and Gaelic customs and all these kind of things. Um, a lot of people would like attribute this. It sounds kind of lazy, but they would attribute this to Kneecap. But I feel like this is a continuous kind of thread that like that Kneecap, how great they are, have definitely capitalized on this, but it's not any one thing. It's like a combination of all these factors to get us to where we are today. And even it seems to be like it's actually spreading and even getting even more. Um, it's growing at a at a very rapid pace. Like it's going cross community as well. Like so many people who before were on the other side of the cultural divide and would class themselves as British in places like Northern Ireland or the north of Ireland would be now learning Irish and are classing themselves as Irish people, um, which is very interesting to see. It's like in 97, 98, you would never have imagined this happening, but here we are. We're at this kind of thing, at this kind of space and time. Like there's an old saying that people hear the whole time, like Chucky ar la, but like what we're
Yeah.
definitely seeing now is like ta ar la and shaw, like our day is not coming anymore. It's here. You know what I mean? So it's very optimistic. It's very hopeful, which is great to see. Um, but you definitely do see that generational divide
Yeah.
because older people, even today, still have a kind of dismissive attitude of the Irish language, um, which is insane when you can see how like sometimes ferociously Irish some of these older generations are sometimes, but at the same time, it's almost like this part of themselves they just want to cut off. It's a hard thing to kind of reconcile. Um, I don't know if I'm speaking in circles there, but um, I could speak about that all day. It's very it's a very difficult issue.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. Well, and I really I want to focus a lot of the conversation on Ireland and its immediate neighborhood, and not over-index on the broader Irish diaspora, but just because, you know, I have Irish in my background, you know, I can say there's such a break for generations after anybody who left Ireland, because the generation that left just wouldn't share anything. Like, you know, my great grandfather who came over from Ireland, I have no idea if he or his family spoke Irish, and because the Irish language revival wasn't like, at least it wasn't as visible outside of Ireland, you know, until very recently. When I don't know if I mentioned this, but I lived in Edinburgh for a year doing a master's there, and I visited Ireland twice around that time. This was in 2014, 2015. And when I tried to go back and find some relatives, as Americans tend to do, and I didn't even think to ask the folks in that neighborhood. This was in a place called Carriduff in County Clare. I didn't even think to ask, you know, if the family had Irish, you know, language, because that just wasn't even in the picture. I also, you know, this is again going back 10, 11 years. One of my most vivid memories from Edinburgh was the independence referendum, of course. That happened about a month after I touched down there. And at the time, you know, I got to see like the Orange March that came through to push against, you know, splitting from the UK, and all of the British flags waving and stuff. And the sense of Britishness was overwhelming. I didn't really see in the whole time there, you know, even for the rest of the year afterwards, many people, even young people, talking about being Scottish, being Irish, you know, speaking these languages. And that was only 10 years ago. So it does seem that the shift is very recent.
I feel like it's definitely in part due to probably like a weakening of the Anglosphere on a global stage as well, a little bit. Not to get too kind of like, you know, into the like political weeds, but it definitely does seem that and it's actually, I think it was Patrick Pearse that said it's England's difficulty is Ireland's opportunity. So in a roundabout way, you're definitely seeing. Also, at the same time, the correlation doesn't, you know, it doesn't represent causation. Like so, but you do see that in the past 10 years, as things have got, as Britain has started to like recede a little bit from the global stage, that it's leaving a gap for smaller countries like Ireland, like Wales, like Scotland to kind of step forward a little bit, which is only a positive thing, in my opinion. But yeah, that's definitely one thing I can say. Talking about your family in Ireland as well, though, like it's also depending on when they came, because like it's kind of like a Roman concrete kind of scenario where, you know, like the recipe for Roman concrete at the time was so common sense that people didn't even bother to write it down, so it was lost for so long. It's kind of like that kind of thing, especially in like the 1800s in Ireland. In the West Coast, especially with Clare and all along the West Coast, were majority Irish speaking, and not just like could speak Irish and English, but monolingual Irish speakers. The same with the West Coast of Scotland, especially in the 1800s, up until like the late 1800s, after the famine anyway, after on Gorta Mór, because that this Anglicization of the Irish and Scottish Gaels is only really a recent thing. It's only the last 100 to 150 years. Up until then, the majority of people, that's why the Irish faced quite a lot of discrimination in America and these places, because a lot of them just couldn't speak English, you know, and the only thing they had was to sell their labor at a very low price, and that's for that. We can see when people are put into those positions how the scrutiny and the vitriol they face as well, like across the world, even today. So it kind of puts everything into perspective when you realize that like up until 100 years ago, most people in Ireland could only speak Irish. Um, so yeah, like that's the thing. Even thinking, I was looking at your name as well, like
Yeah.
like Aidan and
Yeah.
Ryan, like even those two names there are both very Irish names, um, like Ian, Rian. So like uh, inflammatory little king is what your name means in Irish. Not to be, so you can take that with you anyway. There you go. Like, oh. But yeah, no, that's the crack.
That's funny. I knew the roots of the two names, but nobody's ever put it together in such a colorful way before. Inflammatory Little King.
I
My
don't know
wife is going to get a kick out of
if
that.
it's apt or do you have to live up to it. That's up to you
Yeah.
anyway. Sure. You
Yeah. Well, there's another mystery of the name. Now that you're talking about the west coast of Ireland, when I visited Caraduff, I met I don't want to get too deep into the family history stuff, but a relative was living in one of those byre huts until like 1962, I believe. He was a brother of my great grandfather, and I met a neighbor who knew him when he was a kid and everything. And he would be the one where I would have wondered, did he speak Irish? But he observed that there just aren't very many Ryans in Clare, that Ryans are typically from Tipperary or Cork, and that the family probably moved there one or two generations before. And so I don't know why that would have happened. And one or two generations before that was around the famine. So maybe Irish was lost at that time or not. I don't know. It's just a couple of
I think as
mysteries.
well, um, I feel like a lot of historians as well fall into the trap as well of looking at through one lens. Um, like I grew up around farms, so whenever I see these kind of things, I'm always thinking of the land and the quality of the land and who wants the land and who has the land. And if you look at on a map, or if you ever go there to like Tipperary and to Cork, it's very good flat land. I mean, very very good land. And the thing is, especially, so you're talking about like a couple of generations before the 1800s when the Ryans went from the Midlands to Clare. That's like the 1700s. That's in the height of the penal laws, um, uh, laws that were designed to strip Irish people of their civil rights, of all rights to land and inheritance and everything like that. So the thing is, your ancestors probably were pushed off of the good land in Tipperary and and Cork by Anglo-Irish farmers and by the British government, and moved to the harsher ground in Clare and on the west coast of Ireland. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but these are the kind of like educated speculation that you can jump to
Yeah.
when you use um, the knowledge of the land, the knowledge of like roughly what one place is like and the other. It's broad strokes, like, but that's probably maybe what might have happened.
That's really really interesting. Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but it would make a lot of sense. And I do remember, walking the pastures in Clare, thinking this wouldn't be the easiest to farm,
Well, yeah.
but they made it work for a little while at least. Well, great. I don't want to talk too much about myself. I want to get deeper into your background too. So you studied art history. You're involved in video game development, in app development, and now you're a medievalist. Can you tell me a little bit how you decided to come back to university to pursue this
Well,
particular track?
I feel like I had always left prematurely, just for the really for the want of money.
Mm.
It's always kind of been this kind of thing of like
Hmm.
feeling like you need to get out there and start earning immediately. Um, and that's kind of why I left. And I kind of left Ireland altogether. I was on Erasmus before. And the only reason why I got on Erasmus was because I got a grant for it from, I think it was from the EU and from the Irish government as well. Like while I was in university, so that wasn't too bad. I was in Ostrava in Czech Republic at the time, and that was great. Like you meet everyone from all over Europe. Um, I actually learned quite a lot of Polish when I was there because we were on the Polish border. So it was great. I still every time I meet someone who's Polish, I'm always I always get to crack it out. It's great, and they're always like so surprised, being like, Jesus, it's so good. Like, you know, what I mean, like, because I say like, oh, cześć, jak się masz? Oh, dobrze, jak ty? Oh, jestem chujowo. You know, oh, chujowo. Żartuję, jestem bardzo dobrze. I'd say like, oh, hello, how are you? And it's like, oh, I'm good. Oh, I'm feeling like a vulgar term for like I'm feeling terrible, and I'd be like, oh no, I'm only joking, I'm very good, But the way you say it, and then it's no, it's always nice. Like, it's always nice to kind of crack that out. People love to hear their own kind of language. But so I spent a bit of time there, came back, and immediately I was just I was at that kind of age. I was like 20, so I was like, I need to get out. I need to go. I need to get out. And so I got offered a job in Greece. So there's two jobs that were offered for me. One was it was for fixing phone, like a helpline. One was in Dunleary in German, and the other one was in Greece in English. And I was like, I could do the one in Dunleary, but I'll do it I'll go to Greece anyway because it's all paid for. So let's go for the crack. I spent 2 years there. Some very hard years, very, very hard years. I did see some of the worst victims of austerity in Europe I saw in Greece. It was very hard. And also living that as well. Like, I got down to at one point I was like 65 kilos. I was like, I'm about 95 now. Like, I'm 186, 187 centimeters. So like 65 kilos for me is very thin. Like, I mean, it was not a good time. But after all that, anyway, and after working on building sites and boats and stuff, I kind of decided I had to go back to college. I had to go back to university, and it was kind of wrapped up at the time that when I thought to found Kaloon, and when I came up with the idea for the game, the Gael, the one that we're making, that it all just made sense, just to crack back in. I went on one of those what's the ones, the starter course. It's the introductory course to get back into university, and so after that into first year, and here we are now, and everything's kind of moving into place now. It's not too bad. It's great because every bit of coursework is so relevant to what I'm doing that it doesn't even feel like I'm doing coursework. It's like I'm doing study for the games and for what I'm doing. So it's all being poured into the games that we're making and to the content creation and all that.
So I first encountered some of your short form video content on Instagram about medieval Irish history and thought it was great. And then I looked into your background and saw all of these other things. At first it seems various, but actually there's this wonderful sort of continuity across your studies, the stuff you're putting out on Instagram, the games, Matricianga. I actually did want to ask about the Instagram stuff though, because it's funny content, the Lord of the Rings stuff, the Braveheart stuff. What made you start, wanting to put that out there?
I was kind of really just the fact of like, for a long time I'd always wanted to get Elena for myself. So it's like a yellow robe that they wore in Ireland since time immemorial. The one I have in a minute though with the long sleeves, that's kind of like only like a 16th century kind of thing. Actually, I'll you just give me 1 second. I'll just go grab it there. So here we have it. Sorry, that's a very unprofessional way to run off the camera, but it was this yellow linen Lena with the long sleeves. And so I bought that there for about £150 from it's actually a Polish company that makes these. They make medieval clothes from all over Europe. And so I bought it from them, and I just thought, may as well just make some kind of like horrible histories kind of style wee videos on popular kind of like TikTok sounds.
Bye bye, Jacqueline.
Fuck you and your man!
About well, kind of Irish history, just to show people, like, just to kind of show people, like, this is how Irish people looked back in the day. Do you know what I mean? This is like, I see a lot of stuff of like very poor costume design and very kind of and very questionable kind of stuff that's generated from generative AI, where it makes us just look like everyone else with like mud-colored clothes and these kind of mad foot wraps and stuff like that there. But if you look at the actual depictions, it is very distinct. You don't really see anything like that in Europe anyway. You see other cultures around the world kind of maybe dressing like that, but like you don't really see that in like medieval Europe. And so I thought this could be a funny kind of little series. I only thought it was going to be like a little series, but the more I'm making these videos, the more people are like jumping on and like wanting to, like, there's a guy who's this fantastic kind of amateur blacksmith wants to make me an arm gauntlet, like how you see in the depiction of a Gaelic kern. So it's like, that's brilliant. Like, I mean, this is for want of a better word, like I'm being armed by the community, but like not in that kind of way. So like, like if any MI5, MI6 is listening, like, it's purely for historical kind of reenactment, like, and for videos. But yeah, it's nice. It's kind of a thing that's kind of bringing the community together as well, like in a funny kind of way.
Yeah. Well, I love that. That was immediately striking because you're right. You don't see that too often. There's this, ubiquitous, genericized image of medieval dress that everybody sees, but you don't see that too often. Immediately, when I saw your video, I was like, I need to get one of these Johns. But it's not just the garb, I guess. I've noticed that you are sort of like correcting misperceptions about Irish history, medieval history, whether it be the dress or you mentioned the gauntlet, like the fact that the Irish didn't wear armor. And, you're sort of mixing it up with folks in the comments about some of these, which I find really delightful.
So the last video, I got a lot of flack for saying I don't respect lads who wear armor. And here's the thing.
What are some of the more common misconceptions about Ireland and Scotland, perhaps, in the medieval times?
The biggest ones, one of the biggest ones, and it's also like it's kind of goes both ways, is that Ireland acted as like one single, because I think it's our modern perception of how a country works, is that we look at Ireland as like one single political unit or one single kind of like with like this kind of centralized government, and Scotland to an extent as well. Like it's now with Ireland, it's a bit more clean cut, where it was politically unified. There was more kind of like culturally unified, politically divided, but also like decentralized, like a decentralized kind of form of like of governance, where you had regional kings who were then below with regional chieftains or Taoiseach, and their kin groups, their Finne. You'd have this organization with, over the top as an executive, you would have the Brehunne, the Brehon judges, who would practice what was known as the law of the land, like Glee na Brehunne, or like the Brehon laws. In Scotland as well, you had the similar thing, because you had this kind of Gaelic kind of world that stretched up into Scotland, where there was a big mix between the Gaels coming in and the Picts. Now, the thing is, that is a very contentious subject as well when you talk about the Picts. A lot of those seem to be very, very pro-British voices use it as a kind of a gotcha to like say, like, oh, why should we care about Gaels or Gaelic language because they're invaders as well? What about the Picts? But that's a great thing about being in the University of Glasgow. It's like one of the leading institutions for the research on Picts and on Pictish civilization. Their consensus is that the mixing of the Picts and the Gaels may have gone on for a lot longer than we actually imagine and than we actually think. We like the current kind of understanding is that it was at the 500s when the Gaels from Ireland came to Scotland, but there's a lot of voices there, and there are a lot of evidence that may be pointing to it being a little bit later and maybe going on for a lot longer. So arguments then for Gaelic and for Gaelic languages being indigenous to Scotland, then as a counter argument to these kind of bad faith arguments. But that's one of the kind of misconceptions. These kind of modern notions that people put on the past. And I think it's one of the things that when you do a history course, is the first thing that the teacher, that the professor or whoever tries to instill is that this is a different world, and that modern conceptions don't really fit this kind of, because this is like a different time. Like, this is a different way of doing things. That's why we live in the modern day, because we're living as a result of the development, the political development from ancient times up until now. So when you take a step back, you need to realize you are stepping back into a different, completely different mental framework, and it's trying to, like, very quickly and very, like, with a bit of humor and a bit of a short form video to try, explain these kind of concepts to people, which it seems to be working anyway, because, like, well, people seem to like them, so that's the main thing. Like,
yeah. I noticed your videos first, I think, in a kind of ecosystem of loosely related content stemming from Ireland and Scotland. Some of it is historical, like yours. Some of it is more contemporary political, and some of it is more narrowly focused on Irish language. But I do see it all to be in conversation. I think related to the Irish language revival, and you mentioned Kneecap before. I think we have to talk about Kneecap at some point. I think they helped bring an awareness of this to the broader world. And I know just this week they posted about topping the UK charts, like the first time ever an Irish language album did that. But obviously they didn't come out of nowhere. There had to be a kind of interest in this and an ecosystem for this to help create Kneecap. They're, of course, very political, and I think there's a contemporary political element to the Irish language revival I'm really interested in, and it may also relate to the generational thing. Like, I have not historically very closely followed Irish politics, but I have noticed of late what seems like a real kind of generational dissatisfaction with Sinn Fein from millennials and Gen Z Irish people, and that seems kind of newer. Do you see that as in any way tied to the generational shift in the Irish language revival? Are these like related forces?
Yeah, like, definitely, in the sense that there's a global kind of shift as well. In a lot of younger people in the West seem to, you've got, like, it is kind of like on both sides though, where you've got a lot of young people, as many that are slipping down the alt-right pipeline. I feel like a lot of other young people are going further left as well. So there's like 10, 20 years ago, there's not so much of this kind of like lukewarm middle ground anymore, where it's definitely a lot more polarizing. I think as conditions, as late stage kind of capitalism and neoliberalism like starts to, the effects of that are kind of wearing down this new generation. It definitely is a little bit more polarizing, where you have one side, the left, kind of blaming this on the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, and then you have then the right, who are kind of bamboozled then into blaming this on immigrants and other kind of boogeymen. But you can definitely see that then with kind of like a dissatisfaction, especially in the north. See, because the thing is, in the 26 counties, people would definitely still look to Sinn Fein as kind of like an alternative to the lukewarm, neoliberal politics of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. So you have like Fianna Fáil, who class themselves as the Republican Party, and Fine Gael, who are the successor to the fascist blue shirts from the 30s and 40s. the ones who tried to assassinate Tom Barry and other Irish Republicans as well. Um, so there is a definite dissatisfaction in the 26 counties with that politics, and that's why a lot of people would gravitate towards Sinn Féin down the 26 counties. But it's different up in the north because there's many working class communities that are nationalist communities who are deeply dissatisfied with Sinn Féin because they see them as the landlord party. They see them as buying up, having property portfolios and stuff like that there in the north, while a lot of these communities are suffering, and they're holding them to a higher standard. They want more, even like more radical politics from Sinn Féin, but they don't seem to be delivering it as much. They seem to be walking a very carefully walking a political tightrope in the north, whereas I think by comparison to the south, like the other political parties in the south view Sinn Féin as like completely so dangerously radical, and they're always bringing up connections to Irish republicanism and all that kind of stuff like that. Or distant republicanism in the past, as like these kind of gotchas, these kind of political gotchas. But yeah, it is interesting. You definitely do see the divide, but then you got with this new generation coming up. I feel like they are starting to come together, and you're definitely hearing people from the south, younger people from the south, seem to be a little bit more tuned in to what's happening up in the north than a couple of generations ago. Because it's, in other words, people down the south it'd be more like ladder up politics, where like we have ours now, and stop complaining because we're a republic, and you just better get on with it. It doesn't concern me, kind of thing. That's the general kind of idea. But I definitely feel like as the housing crisis and as like the cost of living crisis and all these kind of things ramp up, I definitely feel like younger people across the whole island are taking a couple of steps back and looking at this with a fresh set of eyes, and being like, we need some more radical politics than what is actually being on offer for us at the minute in order to fix these problems. And to them, Sinn Féin is just not doing it. And I'm saying this as someone who I know a couple of people who are councillors and stuff in Sinn Féin. I have no problem with them at all, but I'm just kind of giving the general kind of zeitgeist which is on the ground. This is the general opinion of these kind of new generations that are coming up, and me talking about like these newer generations like as if I'm not like 31 next week, do you know what I mean? But no, it's that's what I can see anyway. I don't know if that is as an astute kind of political opinion that you're looking for, but in my humble kind of as a video game creator, here's what I have to say about politics.
No, I really appreciate that. It can look fuzzy from across the Atlantic. Like, growing up in Buffalo, there are some very strong Irish political roots like Sinn Féin, and actually the IRA would do political fundraising here quite a bit. Jerry Adams has visited Buffalo, and particularly in the south of the city, there's really deep roots and present day political connections. So you see driving around here like bumper stickers that say 26 plus 6 equals 1 and stuff like that. But from this distance, the Irish politics, or the sort of thrust of Irish politics, can look like a pretty narrowly conceived nationalism. And I think what I'm coming to appreciate now, maybe just because the internet has made it easier to see this stuff, or maybe because it's actually a shift, is a broadening of the political objectives, and a reminder that it's not just a single united Irish Republic. The goal was an socialist Irish Republic across the whole island, and so there's a new focus on the material conditions and where the present day political parties are maybe not meeting those needs. So that's at least what it looks like from here. I totally had no appreciation for the different perspectives on Sinn Féin in North and South, though. That's really interesting.
It is. That is definitely a thing. It's another thing as well, like where it's a lot of people would look, and this is not a new problem. This is a problem that's been as old as like even James Connolly's time, where a lot of people would look at things like socialism and look at these kind of things as foreign interventions into Ireland, where they look at the current makeup of Ireland,
Hmm.
the current like this anglicized Ireland as this is what Ireland is and this is what Ireland always was. And I think this is kind of a reason why I do the work that I do, is that I'm trying to like dismantle these modern conceptions of like, and just to show like the Gaelic Ireland was a lot different and a lot closer to what you would perceive as this great villain of socialism. Like with the sense of we have the Rundal system, um, and the Twyha system and all these kind of different kind of in Gaelic Ireland, where you know the Darragh Fenians and the clan and the tribe itself, a lot of things were divvied out, like land and possessions and stuff were divvied out to the most competent people, each time, just to make sure that you know for the betterment of the clan and all these kind of things like that. And there was a system rundal, which was where fields were divided every couple of years, so that each person then had an equal kind of share of the field, and they were changed around every 7 years, so that you didn't get stuck with a bad field, or this guy up the road didn't get stuck with a really good field. You got a fair use of all these different fields and different kind of bits of land.
Hmm.
You even see it reflected in our language as well. Like we in Irish, you don't really have any words to possess something. Something's at you. Like I have this caman over here. This is a hurl. Like I mean, call it caman. But in Irish, I wouldn't say like I have a caman. I have a hurl. You would say ta caman a gum, which means there's a caman at me. But it does. It's like it's in front of me. It's with me, but I don't actually own it. I just have it for now. And if I want to put a little bit of emphasis on it, I can say ta caman a gumsa, which means it's really at me, but I don't really own it. It's just mine until the next person gets to use it. And that's really the kind of underlying philosophy I
Hmm.
can see from the Irish language and from Gaelic culture as well. And by looking at these kind of lenses, I'm starting to see that these uh, these kind of things, it's these kind of socialist practices, proto-socialist practices as well. They're not so alien and they're not so foreign, as a lot of right-wing kind of pundits would try to say, or try to point out to this kind of these kind of like, I don't know, with me looking into the history of like these kind of older ways of working. This is a kind of appeal to nature, but it's almost like a refutation of this kind of right wing appeal to nature of like might makes right. You know, the the guys at the top are at the top because they earned it, and they're just the best, and we just need to get on with our lot. Like I mean, but I feel like that's it's definitely a very constructive thing that I'm trying to do, um, with my education and with my platform.
We've talked a little bit about, you mentioned Blind Boy, Kneecap. I think I'd add in like Mancan Magan and Irish with Molly, figures that are bringing the Irish language revival and an interest in Gaelic culture to the wider world. I think the other thing that has drawn the world's attention to some of the things that are unique about Irish or broader Gaelic culture and politics is, oddly enough, Palestine, and the unique relationship that Ireland and Palestine have, which I think, at least in America, was lost on most of us until now. And you may see an Irish politician speaking openly about Israel committing genocide in Palestine. Many other shows of solidarity. There is, of course, the whole Kneecap terrorism trial and all of that. And I think it just brought to folks' attention outside of Ireland how interestingly connected these cultures are, But I still don't think it's all of that is widely understood. Besides the fact that there seems to be a lot of sympathy in Ireland for the Palestinian cause. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about
Well,
how that historically developed.
it's I think it's one of those things as well that at the start it's kind of developed by accident. Um, but one of these kind of like really tragic accidents, in the sense that when we suffered our own brutal colonialism by the British government, um, in the form of like the Black and Tans during the War of Independence, um, they did horrendous things in Ireland. But when we eventually did well, when the 26 counties gained independence, the Black and Tans then were obviously shipped up and sent then to Palestine to to police the region again as well. Like, and so in just in with the stroke of a pen, at the end of our War of Independence, you've linked the two countries together through like a shared trauma, straight away, um, by the exact same um, you know government, like dealing with their colonial possessions. One being Ireland, the other one being Palestine. Um, but there's also other like wee links. There's a wee tiny link that I found as well by learning Irish again as well. There's one wee tiny link I found with Arabic. Is that we have a similar word for knife. Um, so like skiing for in Irish and sakin in Arabic. So I know it's very silly little link, but like there's another like little there's multiple, like when you start to dig, there's all these like little links, like but it's definitely a thing that in Ireland we definitely do see the trauma and the oppression that the people in Palestine and in Gaza are feeling and experiencing. And we do liken it to ourselves, and we do liken it to everything that has happened to us, from time immemorial. Like we when you see like explosions and you see troops in the streets and pointing guns and stuff like that, there it is very reminiscent of, for us, like the British Army in the streets of Belfast, in the streets of Derry, um, terrorizing the local population. Also, like the conflict as well, and all these things that were generally happening. Um, the the not just with the armed conflict between the IRA and the British Army, and then also the UDA and the UDF and all that, but also you have just general sectarianism, and this division of the community, with how you've seen in Palestine. There was there was not just Palestinian Arabs, but also Palestinian Jews, and everyone kind of living in that one space. Then over the course of during this mandate of Palestine, during this with the Nakba and all these other kind of things out there, this this rampant kind of escalation of this just conflict between these multiple communities that before lived all together. And it's a thing that in Ireland we definitely see for ourselves, like a lot in Ulster as well. Like there was, even though there was the plantation of Ulster and all that kind of stuff, you did have with like the United Irishmen with Wolfe Tone and Henry Joe McCracken, two other Protestants who rose up for Irish freedom. You did see this kind of this unification of all these denominations to to push for one kind of national goal, and that it could be done. And so when we see this kind of this mad division and this conflict between all these people, it does remind us of our own kind of our own situation in the north, and also what happened in the rest of the island as well. Like, so I feel like that's for us. That's we feel like we have to do whatever we can in whether like diplomatically or even financially, whatever we can do to like to aid, like to with the flotillas and with for civilian aid and for things out there, because it does it does weigh heavily on us. I think as politically, it's just it's I don't know what it is. It's just it's again as well, like I said this before, it just feels like political common sense in an Irish sense. Like, if you're Irish, it just feels like just common sense that, you know it's just not on. Like, it's just these kind of this oppression in Palestine, and this kind of and all the bombing and all the stuff like that there. But it's yeah, it is interesting. It kind of mirrors as well, like, how during the height of the famine, there was, like, Queen Victoria, I think, only gave like £1,000 of relief. There was also this kind of general kind of Malthusian air that, like, you couldn't give famine relief without making people work for it, because then they'll get lazy and expect a handout. This kind of this laissez-faire economics. But it was at the time, I think it was more so despite the British, that the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire snuck 3 ships full of food into Drogheda to feed the local population. And there's still, if you look at it, I don't know if you're going to be
Wow.
able to do like a wee overlay with the editing, but you'll see a plaque at the harbour, where the Drogheda's emblem is now the 3 crescents of the Ottoman Empire. Um, so it's there, like, it's so these links to the Middle East, and also to the things, they go back a long way. And I know
Wow.
that was the Ottoman Empire, it wasn't Palestine, but you definitely see these kind of mirrors of, like, we we extend the hand out, because people have extended the hand out to us. Like, also, like, the I can't remember what nation it was again. Don't know, was it Choctaw or who it was, who, after the Trail of Tears, and after they were devastated, by the U.S. government, by their actions of displacement and moving them on, how they, got together whatever money they could, and they sent it over to us for our famine relief. And it wasn't a lot of money, but it
Wow.
meant so much more, because that was the least that they had to give it to us, and to help us during our famine. Um, so I feel like for Irish people, we hold this kind of idea in our hearts, that it's our duty to help. You know what I mean? And that's, for us, being on the right side of history means helping with these kind of situations, with these kind of humanitarian crises, like what's happening in Palestine at the minute.
Yeah, well, I want to underscore a few things too, because you brought up so many different connections. I mean, linguistically, I could be wrong about this. Maybe let me know. But aren't Gaelic and Arabic some of the only languages that always begin sentences with verbs?
I think so. Yeah, we've also have a very similar kind of, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a way of pronouncing, like, a lot of our languages in the throat as well. Um, like, we have,
Hmm.
like, even how you say my name, like my name, like Darragh Mac AnGhaill, like, that's in the throat, like Ghal. And the same with, like, with a lot of Arabic words, is that same kind of, breathy kind of, vocalizations. Um, that's why a lot of anglicized place names make no sense in modern Ireland, because the English couldn't actually make these noises. So, like, Gidor in Donegal is spelled, in English, it's spelled Gweedore, and that's Gweedor, but, like, it's Gaydor, Gay, like, for the wind, it's Gaoth, but you need to use your
Yeah.
throat to say it. Um, but yeah, that's like, there's a lot of things. That's another tangent as well. Like, how we call English is called Berla, because Bail Ra, mouth sounds, because it's all spoken in the mouth, at the front of the mouth. You don't use your whole mouth. You don't use your throat. You only speak with the front of your mouth. But that's a whole other tangent as well.
Yeah, I remember when you posted that. I loved that insight. Well, and also, so you mentioned the black and tans. I wanted to underscore this. It's not, to my mind, just that the British Army was in Ireland and then the British Army was in Palestine. I mean, the British Army was everywhere.
Yeah,
It was some of the same exact people. Frank Kitson and others who were taking what they learned on the streets of Derry or Belfast and then applying that on the streets of Gaza City. Not just this amorphous blob of like the British imperial power. It was the same exact people. And then, the discourse in America, at least around this, the word genocide, or let's say that there was some reporting from New York Times opinion writer Nicholas Kristof this past week about the systematic use of rape of Palestinians in Israeli prisons. And then there were protests by Zionists outside of the New York Times offices. There's a debate around like what language you even can use to describe the situation. And that's kind of reaching a boiling over point right now. I think one of the arguments I hear frequently from the pro-Israeli or Zionist camp against the use of the term genocide is that, well, the population of Gaza has increased, which is false. That's based on old projections before October 7th, or that they let in aid, as you said, or that the population isn't exterminated. If Israel wanted to exterminate the population, they could have done it immediately. Those things are all true, but I think they're all bad faith arguments. And I think the Irish historical perspective is very well positioned to recognize that they're bad faith arguments. As you pointed out, Queen Elizabeth brought aid to Ireland, but it was meager aid, just as Israel has sort of choked off aid going into Gaza, even though technically some is allowed in. And similarly, regardless of what you call it, what word you want to use as a label, the extermination or displacement of a people can happen slowly. It doesn't have to happen with an atomic bomb or gas chambers. It can happen over decades or even centuries, as the Irish very well know. Land displacement, famine, sort of economic levers, persecution, the elimination of a language, all these things. That takes time, and the goal may not be just evaporating people. So at least that's how I see it. I think the Irish, again, are well positioned to understand those arguments as bad faith.
You hear that quite a lot, and it's a lot of discourse that comes from not just from the British when they're talking about on Gorta Mór or like the Great Hunger, the famine, but also from maybe what we would call, like, I know it's not very kind. It's not very kind word to say, but there's a word, West Britain is what they call someone who is Irish who espouses pro-British talking points, so like a West Brit. But you hear a lot of that kind of things where like, oh no, it wasn't a genocide because X, Y, Z. But when I just, for my university course, actually, I had to do quite a bit on Gorta Mór, and there's a lot of stuff like, it's when you look at the Irish language name for on Gorta Mór. So on Gorta is it's the hunger, because you can't have a famine in a country full of food, and that's what Ireland was at the time. There was a big framing. They love to frame it in the sense of like, and it is in the popular imagination, especially in Britain, of the Irish just love potatoes and that's all we eat is potatoes. And geez, the silly Irish, the silly paddies, they just couldn't eat anything else but potatoes, and they just put them in the ground and they all rotted and then they all died. But the thing is, potatoes are obviously a food from the New World. They were introduced into Europe. This was the cheapest food that people could live on a small stretch of land. After Gaelic Ireland was destroyed in the 1603, 1607, after the Tudor conquest of Ireland, a disastrous thing that killed about, I think it was about 200,000 people, which doesn't sound like a lot of people, but when the whole country was about 600,000 people, that's a fair chunk, like, But after this, then you have the implementation of the penal laws and stripping away of land rights of these Gaelic clans to completely destroy this Gaelic Irish civilization, so that we were reduced to having to eat potatoes on small strips of land, and having to use a section of potatoes and a section of other kind of crops that we could grow in order to pay rent to absentee landlords. While these large Anglo-Irish Protestant farms, they had they were full of food, full of herds of cattle, herds of sheep, herds of all these things out there. And all of this food was taken, especially during the harshest years of one of the famines, which was on Gorta Mór, one of the many famines. During the harshest year of that famine, these these uh, um, these shipments of food were taken to London markets under armed guards to the docks, and that many times there was a lot of riots and food riots because starving people, could see carts and carts and carts of food being loaded up onto ships and taken away to England. So that's why it's called on Gorta Mór. Like it's not the famine. There wasn't a famine. There was food everywhere. Just we were not allowed to eat it, and you can definitely see. And it's great because when it's this kind of British and kind of Western kind of talent for being able to speak circles around an oppressed people and say, oh well, according to the law, this is technically not this, and this is technically not that, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the Irish know well about these kind of tactics and about this kind of strategy, and I feel like it's a thing that we're obviously, like you said yourself, that we're starting to see again in relation to Palestine and in relation to these things that after the 7th of October, October 7th, but also that has happened and been going on for much longer, well before, since the Nakba in the 40s and 47. Like, so yeah, it's just giving like an Irish perspective there.
Yeah.
It's like that famous line from Pocahontas, like, these white men are dangerous, like, so don't listen to the Brits, like when it comes to these kind of things, especially when it comes to human rights, because you know look about and keep your eyes open. But yeah, there
Right.
you
Well,
go.
you're talking about talking around reminds me of one other bad faith argument that I think has a connection to Ireland, and that is the question of nationalism. There's this argument that like there really was no Palestinian nation and there was no Palestinian national movement until the creation of Israel, which again is true, but that applies this modern conception of the nation state as like a prerequisite for sovereignty, which is ridiculous. You pointed out Irish culture prior to the Tudor invasion being a unified culture, but sort of loosely confederated and with autonomy, like significant autonomy, right, across the different kingdoms. And I don't. This is using a bit of a broad brush here, but the Ottoman Empire functioned in a similar way, as did all the other empires that occupied the Levant. So there was a Palestinian identity. There wasn't a Palestinian nationalism in the narrowly conceived modern sense of the word. And once again, I think the Irish would recognize that argument and be able to call it out.
Oh yeah, like 100%. Like that definitely is like the justification of like going back to even to like Henry II, that like Ireland wasn't a unified thing, just a bunch of squabbling tribes. So we can
Hmm.
just take them over and incorporate them into our empire, and then we create the lordship of Ireland, and then we create the kingdom of Ireland in this United Kingdom. Um, and it is a thing that you definitely see with these European empires and with the Ottoman Empire and other empires as well. How these are justifications for imperialism, like, but like in the case, like Ireland has existed as like a place, as a region, as a culturally like significant place, um, since time immemorial. Like, this is like era has existed for thousands and thousands of years, long before the English ever came to England from the north coast of Germany and the Frisian coast, and South Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. Like, people tend to forget that while we were while we were just converting to Christianity, the English had just arrived in England. In England, it was the Britons who had it before, the modern day Welsh, like, so you definitely do see a pattern of this kind of settler colonial mentality goes back to absolutely day one, because even we look at it like a settler colonial mentality of the United States or other projects around the world, and we look at them like coming from England. Well, in some most cases, like the founding fathers and that, the main kind of 13 colonies that were part of the British Empire that made up the early United States, coming from England. But this kind of seems to go in a straight line, that it's since day one. Since day one, it's been move, occupy someone else's land, push them out, and then this becomes our place. This place for you know white Anglo Saxons. Not to be too harsh or too kind of thing out there, but you definitely see this mentality, and it's been fostered up until the modern day, where countries can just move in and completely eradicate and displace the population, and create a country, and then just erase its history and erase the history of its people. Um, and that's the thing. We definitely see that now. It's happening. There has been mentions of Palestine, or places like Palestine, or names that are similar to Palestine, since I think it the time of the Philistines, or is that even what like yeah, there was Palestina, which was the Roman province, and I remember seeing a picture of this. I just wish I could just remember all the names, but it it, it definitely did go back far enough. I wish I could like properly cite an academic source. It would make it a lot heavier, but um, you know what I mean. These people have been there for a long time, and especially breaking it up, with through religious and ethnic grounds as well, is very insidious as well, because like as we said as well before the Nakba, there was there was Jews in Palestine, and there was Christians in Palestine, and there was Muslims in Palestine, and it was all sorts, but all these people were Palestinians. Well, to the best of my knowledge, this is my conception, this is my understanding
Yeah.
of the situation, that there was multiple peoples living in Palestine who considered themselves to be Palestinians. I even remember seeing there was Palestinian passports. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it was like for the mandate of Palestine, but it was like passports. So this place existed, and these people existed, and they lived together in the one place. Um, so that's the thing. It's but because of legal jargon and a lot of this kind of, again, we're tying it back to Ireland with this English talent for speaking circles in a court of law. Um, it's this use of language has just been used to bamboozle people, or attempt to bamboozle people into thinking that a place like Palestine never, or a place like Ireland never existed, and so just justify brutal oppression and colonialism. Yeah, so but I don't know. I think that might put a target on my back, but that's sometimes you have to, in order to say what you have to say, or what needs to be said. Not everyone's gonna like it, but that's generally the crack. Sorry, I feel like I'm going on a big rambling
Yeah.
tangent again there, but yeah.
No, no. This is actually, you're hitting on what I was actually most interested in talking with you about. And I'm going to back up a little bit. You said a couple minutes ago, dissatisfaction with late stage capitalism. When I don't know, 15 years ago or something, when I first read Frederick Jameson, I was actually kind of annoyed by the coinage of late stage capitalism, and annoyed when people would use that, because I thought at the time, there's nothing late about capitalism. This is churning, and it's going to be a little bit different, but there's not some other thing. And the whole sort of millenarian tendency of Marxist thought just annoyed the hell out of me, because I did not see us definitely marching towards some other form. of social organization. But more recently, it does seem pretty clear that neoliberalism is like flying apart, and capitalism is undergoing changes and is really notwithstanding a lot of the sort of pressures that are being put upon it right now. And maybe there's not some utopia on the other end of this, probably not, but something different is taking shape like right now. So I'm maybe revising my opinion, and I can be a little gentler with Jameson and anybody else who uses that language. When I saw you start to talk about Gaelic cultures as providing potentially alternative models to the Anglo-Saxon or Norman culture that produced capitalism and neoliberal capitalism, that sort of, turned on a light bulb for me. I know, we don't want to go back to necessarily like a medieval Irish style of feudalism, but maybe there are some things that could be instructive for new ways of organizing society. You started to talk about that, but I wondered if you could go a little deeper there. Do you think there are other lessons from the medieval Irish or broader Gaelic past that we should really keep in mind now?
Look at, we need to be generous as well when we look at Gaelic Ireland as well, because what we're doing is we're comparing as well the modern day, we're comparing 21st century politics and social organization to 10th or 9th century Irish organization, or like society, and the thing is, and that's a great thing as well, to compare its contemporaries with the Saxons and with the Normans as well, because to look at where if Irish culture was allowed to progress to the modern day, like completely on its own, completely unmolested its own, and just properly in its own right, and given its own space to flourish. It's this kind of hypothetical, wondering where this could have gone, because the thing is, especially Professor Davio Cronin, he does a lot in his book Early Medieval Ireland. It's early medieval Gaelic Ireland from 400 to 1200, I think. He does a lot to demystify Breton law, where it is presented by contemporaries in Saxon England and in Norman England, that this is just some quaint kind of law of the land kind of thing. But in actuality, Breton law was developed over generations. So this is sorry, this is hundreds of generations of judges improving the law and coming and debating and coming to consensus and changing the laws in order to get to, in their minds, what is the perfect way for the people to be governed and people to live their lives. Not even to be governed. It's not even a set of laws for a top-down hierarchy to control the population, but it's a kind of thing of guidelines, and guidelines to a Breton and to a king, to be how do we settle disputes, and how do we settle cases, and how do we when that is the nature of life, is that we kind of come into contact with each other sometimes, but how we come into conflict, and how do we settle these conflicts in the fairest way possible? And that is really the idea. The kings themselves, even the Ardri, the High King, they couldn't change any of these laws. This was entirely the realm of the Bretons. The king himself was actually the judge. He was the one who came in and he was the arbitrator of these courts and of these kind of conflicts. But he didn't make any of these laws. He didn't hold absolute power like a Norman or a feudal king, or like a Roman emperor. So you didn't see these kind of mad. You did see, some of these mad kind of crazy abuses of power. But the thing is that a lot of these Gaelic kings who did do these kind of things, there was one guy, I think it was someone to do with, not Ruairi O'Connor, but the guy Dermot McMurrow, who invited the Normans in. Someone to do with him. He blinded his brother, but he was immediately found guilty of doing this and sent into exile. So these kings weren't above the law. They faced a lot of they lived under the law as well. So it's these kind of comparisons to medieval Europe. It's help us to understand if Irish culture was allowed to flourish on its own, where it could have gone. It could have developed a more egalitarian civilization, as opposed to what we have now and what was imposed on us. And as you said before as well, like no place is utopia. It can't exist. Like no kind of utopia can't exist. But we can, as people, just do our best to do whatever is the fairest for the most amount of people. But trying to not go on a mad tangent, but like, yeah, it's I'm just there's so much I can talk about. Like there's actually so much, so many of these comparisons that you can't actually make. Like in Gaelic Ireland, we didn't have serfdom. Now, the one thing that, especially in pre-Christian and up until, I think it was till before the Vikings came, until after the Vikings left, there was quite a bit of slavery in Ireland. Doolin was one of the largest slave ports in Europe that was established by the Vikings. So with the Christianization of Ireland, you see this move away from outright slavery. It was then brought back again by the Vikings because it was very, very lucrative. They could make so much money with it. But then after they went away again, then it kind of fell back out of fashion. It was interesting though, because even though it was technically slavery, these people did come in under. They were like they did have human rights underneath Breton law, so it wasn't like in the sense of like where like someone could be completely like abused and thrown about like with other parts of Europe as a slave. Like you come in, you do the work, and that's it. And there could be room for social mobility. It wasn't perfect though, like, and it's still, at the end of the day, it still was slavery, like, which is morally reprehensible. And that's a other thing as well. Like a lot of the monks that were parts of the abbeys and monasteries in Ireland were actually technically bought as slaves to the monastery. So it's interesting. Like Blind Boy does a really good. I think there's a really good documentary he made for RTE about this.
None of this is real. This is all made up. These are paid actors. This dog has eyebrows.
The popular conception of Irish monastic life often fails to mention one very inconvenient fact.
Slaves.
Slaves.
Slavery.
Slavery.
Slaves?
There was a lot of fucking slaves, and we don't talk about that.
About the kind of dark history of slavery in Ireland. It's a great one to check out. But yeah, that's what we're talking about. So like this isn't really a utopia. These aren't utopian concepts really. This is just a different kind of a more egalitarian kind of system. What we're looking at is it in the 10th century. So we take some of these core concepts that seem to be, for us Irish people anyway, they seem to make a lot of sense for us. I know that's a lot of the things that I'm saying now. This is just opinion. This is not very academic of me, but as an Irish person looking at these kind of laws and looking at these things, they just make a lot of sense, and I feel like we could develop these kind of concepts for the modern day, for Irish society in going forward into the latter half of the 21st century in this kind of current kind of climate, which would work a lot better than what we have at the minute, which was imposed by the colonial forces of Britain in Ireland. One little footnote as well, actually, we didn't use currency in Ireland up until the 1000s. It was mostly a cattle-based economy, and not in the same way that people think that we, like you went down to the shop and you had like 5 cows with you, but more so in the fact that the wealth, your wealth was tied up to the wealth of your Twaya, your clan, like your tribe. So that's the thing. It was more of a collectivist kind of ethos. So your massive herd of cows. If you had a massive herd of cows, your tribe was rich, which meant that you were rich, and vice versa. If you didn't have that many cows and you were poor, your tribe was poor. So that's the thing. Like currency was then introduced with the Vikings, with using silver pennies and stuff like that there afterwards. Up until this point, though, gold, bullion, and other things were also very precious, but they were kept for trade and for international trade. But in the interior, in like actual like Gaelic Ireland, currency just wasn't found. We haven't found like coins in circulation, not like you would see in like Celtic Britain or in Gaul and other places like that. So it's a completely different way of. I'm not saying it's unique to the world, but it's definitely unique to Europe. Anyway, you wouldn't see this in Western Europe. Um, this kind of way of living and organizing society, which hopefully goes like by teaching people about this and by showing this, you can like people can understand why the English and the British treated the Irish with such like hatred and vitriol in the past is purely because like this is to them this is a completely alien and quote unquote savage civilization who do things completely assways.
Yeah, well, you mentioned this idea on the right that socialism in Irish politics is some kind of, outside intervention, not to be desired. And, today, like European style socialism is collapsing or retreating everywhere. Like, even Sweden is going like hyper-capitalist. So maybe the future of Irish politics and politics outside doesn't look like that if that has in fact failed, but still could look egalitarian based on these Gaelic models, or if not based on, then at least informed by these Gaelic cultural models. That's why I think it's so exciting that you're bringing this to a wider non-specialist audience through everything you're doing. Speaking of which, I haven't said the word Gaelmaxxing though, and that is what I wanted to title the episode. So this is a word of your coinage. What is Gaelmaxxing?
Gaelmaxxing is. It's kind of like a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of twist on that looks-maxing kind of craze, So, it's a little bit, it's a little bit kinder to your face since you don't have to like smash it with a hammer. All you're going to have to do is, it's a combined effort to Gael max your life, to optimize your life in the most Gaelic way possible by learning Irish, dressing Irish, and also just being culturally Irish or being culturally Gaelic. And I try to use Gaelic as much as possible because I feel like if I say Irish all the time, I'm kind of excluding a lot of people from the west coast of Scotland and from the Isle of Man. So it's an open club that all kind of three regions, all three countries can kind of like jump in on, like this Gaelmaxxing thing. So like first step is like you get yourself a lena or you get yourself a kilt or get yourself any of that kind of stuff. Go to your Kokokora, to your speaking circle, learn Irish, listen to Irish music, listen to like stuff like not just Kneecap and all that, even though Kneecap is class, like, but not just listen to Kneecap, but like stuff like the Bothy band and like Clannad and Altan and all these kind of Irish language, kind of traditional kind of Irish songs and music. More so as well, like just get outside, go into nature, take your shoes off, walk barefoot in the grass, that kind of thing. It does sound like a mad kind of 1960s hippie kind of thing, but like trust me, there's method here in this madness. You're trying to get your kind of mind into how our ancestors, like 500 years ago, saw the world and experienced the world. You definitely see that with Irish anyway. We have so many words for nature and for the outside world. One thing from jumping back into Irish and from learning Irish again is that I'm starting to see that it is a language for being for experiencing the outside world. Um, we've got so many words for rain, for different types of rain, for different types of animals, for different types of holes in the ground, and is a hole made from a hoof, or is it a hole made from like a little animal to burrow into, or is it an underground hole, or is it a hole in the bank, or something for a fish to lay eggs in? There's all these like words, all these hundreds and hundreds of thousands of different words and vocabulary for the outside natural world. And the funny thing is, then when we come to the English world, we would call it the English world, but this kind of European kind of Western kind of world, and we look at the words for that, like finance and business and all these kind of things. We have to use what's called Berlicas, which is English words, Englishisms. We put them into Irish, so we have like a compordoc or something like that there for company, and a lot of these words that sound very similar to the English version because we just plucked it from English. So for all these kind of like artificial kind of things, we borrow from English and from other words, other languages. But the majority of our language is all for outside and in nature, and we have so many words as well for like interactions between people, for words for generosity, and words for like and for being friendly, and for also for fighting. And I remember seeing as well, like there's a statistic where someone was saying that we have like it's like 20, 21 or 22, I think it was like even like 30 words for gossip, because that's a culturally like a little bit of a big thing. Like people, like we love to talk, like we love to jabber, like we love an old yap, like so like and that's the best way, is that the gossip and stories and the narrative and spinning a narrative is a big thing here, like so that's the thing. It's that's definitely a part of Gaelmaxxing, is the core element is Irish, is Gaelic and Gaelic and all those and the Gaelic languages. That's the core element. So yeah, that's it. Like like optimizing your life, to make yourself the perfect Gael. Like you can see it myself. Like I'm starting to grow my hair out and grow the beard as well. So like if you did a side by side right now, not only if you can do it editing, but if you did a side by side of me and that Kern, I get this a lot of the time, that I look just like that guy who's he has a spear over his head like that there. Like this is it. Like this is just the result of Gaelmaxxing. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what it's going to do for your wallet. I don't know if it's gonna if you'll if you get six figures or buy a house with this, but like it's definitely a fun hobby. Anyway, that's the main thing. But yeah, that's in a nutshell. Anyway, the best way I can put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds great. When I think of the Irish political imagination, sometimes we started there, with the Fenians and their invasion of Fort Erie, but sometimes I think there can be, especially among the diaspora, like a tendency to romanticize and flatten the Irish cultural and political imagination. I even think of like Yeats's poem about his ideal reader, the Connemara fisherman in his gray Connemara cloth. Maybe a tendency to oversimplify things. But Gaelmaxxing does seem to be really robust. And maybe that is a better way to immerse oneself in the Gaelic cultural and political imagination.